You ever feel like there's a war happening inside you? Like part of you wants to do one thing, but another part is pulling you in the opposite direction. Maybe you've tried to set goals, to be disciplined, to take control of your life, but there's always that nagging voice, that self-doubt, that sabotages everything. It's like every time you take one step forward, something inside you pulls you 2 steps back. That's the war I'm talking about. And no, it's not some vague metaphor. It's real, and it's happening right now within you. Carl Jung, one of the greatest thinkers in modern psychology, said it best: until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Let that sink in for a second. What he's saying is that this inner conflict, this invisible battle, is mostly happening without you even realizing it. And unless you confront it, unless you become aware of it, it's going to keep running your life. The question is, are you ready to face it?
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
Let me tell you a story about you. Imagine you're standing in the middle of a battlefield. On one side, there's a version of you who's disciplined, focused, driven. This is the ideal self you imagine when you think about who you want to be. On the other side, there's another version of you, your shadow. This is the part of you that's filled with fear, doubt, laziness, maybe even anger. These two sides are locked in a constant battle, and you're caught in the middle. Every decision you make, every action you take, is influenced by this war. But here's the twist: they're not actually enemies. They're two parts of the same whole. Jung called this process individuation. It's the journey of integrating these opposing forces within yourself. He said, the acceptance of oneself is the essence of the whole moral problem and the epitome of a whole outlook on life. What he means is that the key to ending this inner war isn't about choosing one side over the other. It's not about killing your shadow or silencing your doubts. It's about accepting and integrating all parts of yourself, even the ones you hate, even the ones you're ashamed of. Now, I know what you're thinking. That sounds great in theory, but how do I actually do that? Don't worry, we're getting there. But first, let's talk about why this war exists in the first place. See, when you were a kid, you were whole. You didn't have this split within you. You were just you. But as you grew up, society, your parents, your teachers, they all started telling you who you should be. They rewarded you for being good, for being obedient, for fitting in. And they punished you for being bad, for being different, for stepping out of line. Over time, you learned to hide the parts of yourself that weren't acceptable. You buried them deep inside you, in your unconscious mind. And that's how your shadow was born. Jung said, the shadow is a moral problem that challenges the whole ego personality, for no one can become conscious of the shadow without considerable moral effort. In other words, facing your shadow isn't easy. It's uncomfortable. It's messy. It's painful. But it's also necessary. Because as long as you keep ignoring it, as long as you keep pretending it doesn't exist, it's going to keep running your life from the shadows. So, how do you confront your shadow? How do you end this inner civil war? The first step is awareness. You have to start paying attention to the parts of yourself that you've been avoiding. The fears, the insecurities, the anger, the jealousy, all the emotions and traits that you've labeled as bad. Jung said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. Think about that for a moment. The things that annoy you, the things that trigger you, the things that make you angry, they're all reflections of something within you. They're mirrors, showing you the parts of your shadow that you haven't accepted yet. For example, let's say you get really annoyed by people who are lazy. You pride yourself on being hardworking, disciplined, and productive. But deep down, there's a part of you that's terrified of being lazy. Maybe it's because, As a kid, someone told you that being lazy makes you worthless. So, you buried that part of yourself. But it didn't go away, it just became part of your shadow. And now, every time you see someone being lazy, it triggers you. Not because of them, but because of the part of you that you're rejecting. This is why Jung said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. True growth doesn't come from pretending to be perfect. It comes from embracing your imperfections, from shining a light on your darkness, from accepting that you are both light and shadow, both good and bad, both disciplined and lazy, both strong and weak. Here's the second step: dialogue. Once you become aware of your shadow, you need to start having a conversation with it. And no, I'm not talking about literally talking to yourself in the mirror, although, hey, if that works for you, go for it. What I mean is, you need to start listening to what your shadow is trying to tell you. Every part of you exists for a reason. Even the parts you hate, especially the parts you hate, they're trying to protect you in some way, even if their methods are flawed. For example, let's go back to the lazy part of you. Maybe it's not actually trying to sabotage you. Maybe it's trying to tell you that you're overworking yourself, that you need to rest, that you're burning out. Or maybe it's trying to protect you from failure by keeping you from even trying. When you start to see your shadow as an ally instead of an enemy, everything changes. Jung said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And you can't do that without accepting all parts of yourself. The third step is integration. This is where the real magic happens. Integration is about bringing your shadow into the light. It's about finding a way to balance the opposing forces within you, to end the war, not by declaring one side the winner, but by creating peace between them. This doesn't mean you'll never feel conflicted again. It doesn't mean you'll never struggle again, but it does mean that you'll stop fighting yourself. And when that happens, you'll find a sense of inner peace that most people will never experience. Jung said, wholeness is not achieved by cutting off a portion of one's being, but by integration of the contraries. This is what it means to end your inner civil war. This is what it means to become whole. And this is what it means to truly live. Now that we've laid the groundwork for understanding the inner civil war, and looked at how Carl Jung's philosophy guides us toward awareness, dialogue, and integration, it's time to go deeper. This is where we really start to unpack how you can transform this inner conflict into a source of strength, creativity, and self-mastery. Stay with me, because this is where the real work begins. Let's start with the simple but profound truth: the parts of yourself that you've rejected, the parts you've buried deep in your unconscious, contain immense power. They're not just weaknesses or flaws to be discarded. They're also the source of your untapped potential. Jung said, in each of us there is another whom we do not know. He speaks to us in dreams and tells us how differently he sees us from the way we see ourselves. What he's saying is that your unconscious mind, the part of you that holds your shadow, isn't just a dumping ground for your fears and insecurities. It's also a reservoir of wisdom, creativity, and strength. The problem is, most of us are too afraid to tap into it. Think about it like this: imagine you're sitting on a treasure chest. Inside the chest is everything you've ever wanted: confidence, courage, clarity, purpose. But the chest is locked, and the key is being held by your shadow. The only way to get that key is to face the parts of yourself you've been avoiding. And that's terrifying, because those parts hold all the pain, all the shame, all the guilt you've been running from. But here's the thing: the longer you avoid them, the more they control you. Jung put it this way: what you resist persists. The more you fight your shadow, the stronger it becomes. The only way to free yourself is to stop resisting and start embracing. So, How do you do that? How do you turn your shadow into an ally? One of the most powerful tools Jung offers us is the concept of projection. He said, everything that we project onto others is something we refuse to confront in ourselves. Let's unpack that for a moment. Every time you judge someone, every time you criticize someone, every time you feel triggered by someone, it's not really about them. It's about you. It's about the parts of yourself that you've disowned and are now projecting onto others. For example, let's say you can't stand people who are arrogant. You see someone bragging about their achievements and it makes your blood boil. Why? Because somewhere deep down, there's a part of you that wants to feel proud of yourself but doesn't feel like it's allowed to. Maybe when you were a kid, you were taught that bragging is bad, so you buried that part of yourself. But it didn't go away, it just became part of your shadow. And now, every time you see someone being arrogant, it triggers that disowned part of you. The solution? Instead of judging them, ask yourself, what is this reaction teaching me about myself? This is how you start to reclaim your projections and integrate your shadow. Jung called this process shadow work. It's not easy, but it's one of the most transformative things you can do for yourself. He said, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. Why is it terrifying? Because it means letting go of the masks you've been wearing. It means admitting that you're not perfect, that you have flaws, that you've made mistakes. But it also means freeing yourself from the need to pretend. It means stepping into your authentic self, the self that is whole, not divided. Now, let's talk about dreams. Jung believed that dreams are one of the most direct ways your unconscious mind communicates with you. He said, dreams are the guiding words of the soul. Why should I henceforth not love my dreams and not make their riddling images into objects of my daily consideration? Your dreams are like a window into your shadow. They show you the parts of yourself that you've been ignoring. But here's the tricky part, they don't always speak in plain language. They speak in symbols, metaphors, and archetypes. For example, if you dream about being chased, it might be a symbol for something you're running away from in your waking life. If you dream about a monster, it might represent a fear or a part of your shadow that you're afraid to confront. The key is to start paying attention to your dreams and asking yourself, what is my unconscious trying to tell me? Jung believed that by working with your dreams, you could start to bridge the gap between your conscious and unconscious mind. And that's the whole point of shadow work, to bring the unconscious into the conscious, to make the hidden parts of yourself visible. Because once they're visible, you can start to work with them instead of against them. But shadow work isn't just about understanding your own mind. It's also about transforming how you relate to others. Jung said, knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darknesses of other people. When you've done the work to confront your own shadow, you stop projecting it onto others. You stop seeing the world as full of enemies and start seeing it as full of mirrors. And when you can see your own reflection in others, you can start to approach them with empathy instead of judgment. Let's bring this back to the idea of ending your inner civil war. The war happens because you're divided, because you see parts of yourself as good and other parts as bad, but the truth is, those labels are arbitrary. Jung said, the acceptance of the shadow side of human nature brings with it a liberation. Liberation from what? From the need to fight yourself. From the need to suppress, deny, and reject parts of yourself. When you can accept your shadow, you stop seeing it as an enemy and start seeing it as a teacher. Imagine what your life would look like if you could end this war. Imagine waking up in the morning and feeling at peace with yourself, not because you're perfect, but because you've embraced your imperfections. Imagine being able to pursue your goals without being sabotaged by self-doubt. Imagine being able to look in the mirror and say, I see all of me, and I accept all of me. That's what Jung is offering us. Not a life without struggle, but a life where the struggle is no longer against yourself. And here's the kicker: when you end your inner civil war, you gain access to something incredible, your inner power. The energy you've been using to fight yourself gets freed up, and you can channel it into creating the life you want. Jung said, the greatest and most important problems of life are all fundamentally insoluble. They can never be solved, but only outgrown. What he's saying is that the goal isn't to fix yourself, because there's nothing wrong with you. The goal is to grow into a higher version of yourself, a version that is whole, integrated, and at peace. We've covered a lot here: projections, shadow work, dreams, and the transformative power of self-acceptance. But there's still more to explore, because once you've started this journey, the question becomes, how do you sustain it? How do you keep growing, keep integrating, keep evolving? Now that we've come this far, let's explore the next stage of this journey. You've begun to understand the war within yourself. You've started to see how shadow work and self-integration can transform your life, and you've glimpsed the possibility of peace. But here's the real question: how do you live this truth every day? How do you continue to grow, to evolve, to expand into the fullest version of yourself, while maintaining this delicate balance between your light and shadow? Let's go deeper. First, let's address a critical misconception. Growth isn't linear. It's not a straight line where you simply move from one level to the next, always improving, always progressing. It's cyclical. Jung said, there is no coming to consciousness without pain. This means that as you grow, you'll inevitably encounter new layers of your unconscious mind. Just when you think you've resolved your inner conflict, life will present you with a new challenge, a new mirror that forces you to confront another part of your shadow. This isn't failure, this is the process of life. The journey of individuation, of becoming whole, is never ending. And that's a good thing, because it means there's always more to discover, more to integrate, more of yourself to embrace. But here's the hard truth: most people don't want to do this work. They'd rather stay in their comfort zones, even if it means living in internal chaos. Why? Because facing your shadow requires courage. It requires you to feel things you don't want to feel, to confront truths you don't want to confront. Jung said, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. Think about that. How much of your life have you spent running from yourself, distracting yourself with work, with entertainment, with relationships, with anything that keeps you from looking inward? The question isn't whether you've been avoiding yourself. The question is, are you ready to stop? If you're still here, I'm guessing your answer is yes. So let's talk about how to sustain this journey. The first principle is radical honesty. You have to be brutally honest with yourself about who you are, what you feel, and what you're afraid of. This isn't about judging yourself or beating yourself up. It's about seeing yourself clearly. Jung said, we cannot change anything until we accept it. Condemnation does not liberate, it oppresses. If you want to change, you have to start by accepting where you are. That means admitting your fears, your insecurities, your mistakes without shame, without guilt. Because here's the paradox: the more you accept yourself as you are, the easier it becomes to grow. Radical honesty also extends to how you interact with others. Remember, the people in your life are mirrors. They reflect your own unconscious back to you. When someone triggers you, when someone makes you angry or upset, it's an opportunity to learn something about yourself. Jung said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. The next time you feel triggered, instead of reacting, pause. Ask yourself, what is this reaction teaching me about me? This simple question can completely transform how you relate to others and how you relate to yourself. The second principle is self-compassion. Shadow work is hard, it's messy, it's uncomfortable. There will be days when you feel like you're making progress, and days when you feel like you're stuck in the same patterns you've been in for years. This is normal. Growth isn't about being perfect, it's about being persistent. Jung said, "A man who has not passed through the inferno of his passions has never overcome them. You're going to stumble. You're going to fall. And that's okay. The key is to be kind to yourself, to pick yourself back up, and to keep going. Remember, the goal isn't to eliminate your shadow, it's to integrate it. And integration takes time. Self-compassion also means giving yourself permission to rest. Ending your inner civil war doesn't mean you'll never feel conflict again. It means you'll learn to navigate conflict with grace, with patience, with understanding. But that requires energy. It requires you to take care of yourself physically, emotionally, mentally. Jung said, "Wholeness is not achieved by cutting off a portion of one's being, but by integration of the contraries." This includes the contrary of effort and rest, of striving and surrendering. Don't burn yourself out trying to fix yourself. You're not broken, you're human. The third principle is practice. Shadow work isn't something you do once and then move on from. It's a daily practice, a way of life. It's about staying curious, staying open, staying committed to your own growth. One of the most powerful practices you can adopt is journaling. Jung was a big advocate of this. In fact, much of his own shadow work was documented in his personal journal, which he called the Red Book. Journaling allows you to dialogue with your unconscious mind, to explore your thoughts and feelings in a safe space. Try this at the end of each day. Write down your biggest emotional reactions, both positive and negative. Then ask yourself, what does this reaction reveal about me? Over time, you'll start to see patterns. You'll start to uncover the hidden beliefs and fears that are driving your behavior. And once you're aware of them, you can start to change them. Another powerful practice is mindfulness. Jung said, "Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside, dreams who looks inside. Awakes mindfulness is about looking inside. It's about observing your thoughts, your emotions, your reactions without judgment. It's about creating space between stimulus and response, so you can choose how to act instead of being controlled by your unconscious patterns. You don't have to meditate for hours a day to be mindful. Start small. Take 5 minutes each morning to sit quietly and notice your breath. Or, the next time you feel triggered, take a few deep breaths before responding. These small moments of mindfulness can have a big impact over time. Finally, let's talk about purpose. Shadow work isn't just about ending your inner civil war, it's about discovering who you truly are and what you're here to do. Jung said, "As far as we can discern, the sole purpose of human existence is to kindle a light in the darkness of mere being." Your shadow isn't just a source of pain, it's also a source of purpose. It holds the keys to your deepest desires, your greatest strengths, your unique gifts. When you integrate your shadow, you don't just end your inner war, you unlock your potential. You become the person you were always meant to be. So here's the challenge I'll leave you with. Don't just think about these ideas. Live them. Start doing the work. Start paying attention to your triggers, your dreams, your projections. Start journaling. Start meditating. Start having those honest conversations with yourself and others. The journey won't be easy, but it will be worth it. Because the reward isn't just peace, it's freedom. Freedom from the stories you've been telling yourself. Freedom from the patterns that have been holding you back. Freedom to be fully, unapologetically you. And that's the end of this journey we've walked together. If you've stayed with me through all of this, I can only hope it sparked something within you, a question, a realization, a desire to go deeper. So, what do you think? Are you ready to take the next step?